So now we can't go above 4,500 RPMs. What's up? Let me show you what I got going on here. I'm out here trying to try out a new prop on the boat, right? And I'm running along and all of a sudden I lose wide open throttle. And there's something very specific about how I lost the RPM. What I got stuck on is that it went down to about 4,500, which is a very, very common problem to have when you lose wide open throttle. The reasoning behind this is that there's a sensor that's stopping the engine from going all the way open. That's my assumption. As of right now, I haven't done any testing yet, but when I do test, I think I know exactly what's going on. But let me show you exactly what happens so you'll know what I'm talking about and how common this is on many other engines. The engine actually acts pretty normal and climbs the way it should, but it reaches a certain point and then it stops, usually around the 41 to 4,500 mark. So let me show you exactly what happens whenever we hit that RPM. You can cruise around at 4,400 RPM, you can cruise around at 4,300 RPM, but if you hit the 4,500 RPM, the engine just starts bucking and shaking, and it doesn't go any farther than that because it's hitting the rev limiter. So let me show you what that looks like. So if we try and run this boat up, right, we'll get up on plane and then I'll show you. So here we are running 4,300, running 4,300, running 4,400, no problems. Running perfect, no problems. But if we do this, nothing, and the engine, well, you really can't see it shaking because it's pretty smooth, but you can feel it vibrating. Like you can feel the whole boat vibrating because it's hitting that rev limiter. So now we can't go above 4,500 RPMs. So back here, what you're looking at is a plug that looks like this. And what this component does is this wire, actually I've got it pulled out here so you can see, runs all the way down to there, and it goes out the side and it comes to there. That is a trim sensor. So let me tuck this back in there. And the problem with this though, if you're running the engine and that thing goes bad, you can't just unplug it. You turn this engine on, and if we go back here and unplug this thing, back here, unplug it, you can hear it. It's giving an alarm. So it gave an alarm, but it doesn't give any codes, which normally it does. That's something else that's pretty interesting that I found out on these older gauges, since they are a little bit dated. Let me show you this. So normally when you trim the engine, it'll pop up and it'll give you the trim angle. But on this older gauge, it doesn't seem to be doing that, and I didn't know that it didn't do that. So if I hit quick cal or calibration, I can go through these screens and select what you want to show. Remote LCD, calibration, trim calibration. You can calibrate your trim sensor that way, but it's already calibrated. We just lost the whole sensor altogether. Display all the different things, miles per hour, quick reference, temp screen, oil temp screen, oil pressure screen, water pressure screen, RPM screen. So it basically gives you all the screens that you can show to show all the data that you can get from the engine. And this is pretty much like this for all these Mercury gauges. They're called an SC1000, but this one, for some reason I didn't know, doesn't have the trim thing, where the trim screen. It should say trim pop-up, so whenever you trim the engine, the trim number pops up on the screen and tells you what angle it is. This one doesn't have that. So I can't even test my theory while we're out here on the water. So what we're gonna do is we'll go in, we'll put it on a laptop, see what the trim angle is, and then we will see if we are correct or not. Well, I got a little excited and already changed out the trim sender, but I'll hook up the computer and show you what I'm talking about. So this is what we want to normally see. This is with the correct trim sender in there. So right here we've got our trim position percentage, 48%. Trim position raw, which are your counts, which think of this trim position as a 5-volt reference item. So trim position raw, these are your counts or voltage, basically. That's your percentage. And as we trim the engine, you're gonna see those change. So as we go down, we get all the way down, and it gives us, you know, a percentage of where we're at. Now this will, sometimes it'll never go to 0, so don't get too excited about that. And also, as the trim senders get older, sometimes they just don't read the way they should. But as you go up, we do want to see this number climb. So the problem that we've got is that with this other trim sensor, let me hook that up real quick. So now here's our failed trim sender that's plugged in, and this is what they look like on the back of them. It's just a dial that spins. Now the problem with this one is that it's reading 100%, and even as you spin it, sometimes it goes to 0, and other times it goes straight to 100, and you don't even have to turn it much. Even if it turns like this, the thing's stuck at 100. See, oh, now it's 0. Even if I go back, it's not reading. There's a, here we go, now it's starting to read. No, now it's at 100. But what it's doing is, because this thing has failed internally, I mean, look at it, it's all dirty and messed up. But what it's doing is, if this thing is telling the engine that you're trimmed up 50%, then the engine thinks that you're trimmed up out of the water. And if you're trimmed all the way out of the water, it limits your RPM. So that's the problem with these trim systems. And it's very common on many engines to have this same type of trim system, where if the engine thinks that it's trimmed all the way out of the water, even if it's not, it'll limit your RPMs. And unfortunately on this style, if you unplug it, it sounds an alarm, and it doesn't, it still limits you. So you definitely have to have it plugged in. There are some models that you can unplug it and it'll let you go, but unfortunately this one will not. Now that we got our trim sensor fixed, let's go ahead and see what we'll do now. Go ahead and pop this thing up and see if we got our RPM back. Yep, we got our RPM back. 4,900. Running just the way it should. Beautiful.